Hello, Henry
Hi.
Elliston. Henry Elliston has finally joined us. We had a few little technical hitches, but we've overcome them. And we're going to talk a little bit about Adele, but mostly about finances in divorce and finances before marriage. So one of the things that interested me, Henry, is that Adele, in the article that we were reading recently, she seems to have a very trusting relationship with her husband, which is fantastic. And they didn't have a prenup, which is very un-Hollywood. In general, though, if you've got a lot of money, what are your views on prenups, for example? And are there kind of other, I won't say alternatives, but other ways to make sure that everyone's on the same page, even if they don't want to go through the full legal process of creating a prenup?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? They're probably one of the more unromantic forms documents that one can complete, and I suspect that that's why a lot of people aren't that keen on completing them, really. In terms of other documents that you can complete, I'm not sure that there are really. I mean, it's not my perhaps area of expertise, because what you tend to find is that a lot of people will be looking at their marriage as a a lifetime event, and then often when the divorce does arrive, people are many times shocked by it, I suppose, and not that keen on then looking back and going back to where they were once. So I don't know what else one would do other than the prenup, but when the divorce does happen.
How about, because you're a financial planner, aren't you? So you're not just like a normal financial advisor. You look into the future, don't you? You look into how the finances can play out. You do is it called long-term cash flow forecasting, I believe is the.
That's right.
So,
It's not a series of crystal balls, certainly.
And so if a couple before marriage were to do that process, to look forwards, to make their plans, to look at the financial aspects and consider what would happen if they split, especially if they've got a lot of inheritance or a lot of money like Adele has, and have that conversation, do you think that in itself would be valuable, even if they didn't need to necessarily turn it into a legally binding document? My personal feeling is, and call me naive, is that actually, because you've had that conversation together, that puts you in a very different place to that, as you described, shock. And also then the fear can often come in when there's a divorce, especially if it's a messy situation. And that's when a lot of the issues kick off, because that couple will usually have never sat down and talked about what would they do if this happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, putting a cash flow analysis together right from the outset will certainly give you an indication of how your finances might map out. I suspect for many, though, that at the outset of a marriage, they're not then going to say, let's map out our finances and then we'll put in a risk analysis to see what happens if we break up in 10 years' time.
But should
they? Pardon? Should they?
Yeah.
Should they? Yeah, well, yes, perhaps they should. Perhaps that would be the very prudent. Perhaps that'd be very prudent. But in truth, I don't think many people are necessarily going to thank you as they're going through the very happy stages of their engagement, planning for their wedding, to sit down with a financial planner and say, well, now let's just map out what happens then if you get divorced in 5 years' time.
I agree that could be tricky, but the one time when they do need to talk to you is when they decide to divorce. And I think that's something I wanted to ask you about, because in your experience, do you think many people, and I know you talked to quite a few people who are going through divorce at different stages, how many of them knew right from the beginning that that's what they should do? Or do they tend to assume that the lawyers deal with all the finances?
Almost all of them seem to assume that the lawyers deal with the finances. And pretty much most of the lawyers that I speak to are certainly capable of helping the bigger picture with the finances, but actually they're not trained to understand what a mortgage is. They're not trained to understand how pensions work and how to split those fairly. Lawyers are very good at trusts, and I think trusts are certainly an area of planning that perhaps married couples should be looking to utilise just to protect themselves at the point of divorce. But lawyers aren't great at the product bit of financial planning, so the pensions, the investments, and the mortgages, and that's, I think, really where the financial planners probably come in to help, and that's their forte. And it's actually being able to help all sides of that, so helping the solicitors as well as the divorcing couple understand what they can do best and how they can make a fair and, just like Adele, an amicable split, without having to go to court, which I suppose for most people is the ideal.
And do you think in Adele's case, she's got quite a lot of money, so in a way she's not likely to become, worry about whether she can afford to keep the house, that kind of situation, which is great. But for those people you talk to where they don't know, should we sell the house, should we keep it, am I going to have, how much should I be asking for in a settlement? Are those the kind of questions people can be asking you as a financial planner to help them work out?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're absolutely right. So it's okay for Adele, and I know she said she's not all that worried about the money, but when you've got 150 million of them, it's quite easy to not be all that worried about the money. I think for most people who probably aren't as fortunate as her in that, which of course is most, then yes, money plays a significant part in the whole divorce problem and process. And we can help, because what we can do, and it goes back to the bit that we were talking about a bit earlier, we can put the plan in place and we can put the cash flow together, the projections together. And what that enables people to do is to then map out their finances in the future, so that we can then say, look, I tell you what, if you have half the pension, for example, and this share of these investments or that income stream, that maintenance grant, for example, then actually we can demonstrate that you're going to have enough money until the children have left home, and you potentially could return to work or something along those lines. So you're going to be financially stable. It's not always possible, of course, to be financially stable. There might not be enough money to go around, but at least then we can also say, but actually this both puts you in a fair position. You've both got an equitable split of the assets, and not one party's walking off with far more than they should be and leaving the other in the lurch.
That's a fantastic explanation. Thank you, Henry. And just to round off, I'd like to say to anyone watching, do talk to financial planners as part of your divorce process, particularly prior to mediation as well. It's a very good thing to do before and during mediation processes, because you can be talking about real numbers, real projections, instead of just your ideas of what you think should be happening, which is not going to be necessarily a sustainable solution. So thank you again, Henry, and I'll make sure you're, in fact, if you can on Facebook, when this goes live on the page, add your contact details and how people can contact you, that would be fantastic.
Happily, of course. Thanks,
Bye.
Susie.
Thanks. Bye, Henry.
Cheers. Bye-bye.